Tonight, our guest speaker is Katerina Kobryn, who's a consultant dietitian. She's currently working for Nutrition Care Services and providing nutritional care on a private basis. Katerina is an accredited practicing dietitian and
nutritionist.
Nutritionist, that's better, gee.
It's a mouthful, yep.
It's a mouthful, it's worse than Postlethwaite. And delivers presentation for cancer survivors. She has done this through the Cancer Council and the Enrich program. So as well as focusing on cancer survivors, Katerina has experience in dealing with weight loss, weight gain, hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, and anything else that we could possibly have. So would you please welcome Katerina?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I recognise a few of the faces here from the Enrich program from previously. I have done the Enrich program in the past. I haven't done one of these presentations for over a year now, so if there are any questions that are new and upcoming and I can't answer them on the spot tonight, please feel free to email any of your main contacts here and I'm happy to get back to you as well. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation tonight, so I'll just be speaking to you for the next, say, 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll do a little bit of practical work because I'd rather go through a few resources that might be helpful to you, as well as a little bit of label reading, which I know stumps a lot of people when they are out in the shops. So to start with, in relation to cancer and healthy eating, doesn't matter what stage you're at, whether you're trying to prevent, whether you're going through cancer at the moment, or whether you're past that and trying to prevent reoccurrence, or just trying to live a general healthy, happy life, there are very, very similar guidelines. There are a few specific ones that I'll go into right at the end regarding prostate cancer because it is an evolving area in terms of research, but I'll go through the general healthy eating things now. So we'll touch on different macronutrients like carbohydrates, different types of fats and proteins as well. We'll look at sugars, and we'll go through different types of meats, and finally head into some label reading, healthy snack options, and finish up with healthy takeaway choices as well. Okay. So to start with, we look at a healthy body weight. And often people do focus on weight gain rather than being underweight, so I'll touch on that first. So there are 3 different ways we can assess where our weight is at. We can do the eyeball test, so once you pop out of the shower in the morning, you can tell if you've gained a little bit or lost a little bit. You can generally tell what your comfortable weight is. The second way would be a waist circumference, or measuring your clothing size. And the final one is BMI, so you might have heard of body mass index previously, which looks at your height for weight. Basically, we are dividing the weight in kilos by the height in metres squared, and that comes out with a number. Between 18.5 to around 25 is deemed to be a healthy weight range. For anyone over the age of 65, we allow a little bit more, so the BMI is between 22 to 27. There's also a bit of an allowance given for different cultures as well. So for example, in an Asian population or Caucasian population, and possibly also a Polynesian population, the BMI varies depending on what we believe their body structure to be. Okay, doctors as well as health professionals will use this BMI as a guide to determine subcutaneous fat, which is your outside fat, rather than the visceral fat, which is the fat around the organs. So that's the important measure. For people like athletes and a few populations, it doesn't work very well because BMI does not take into account muscle mass. So if you've suddenly put on a lot of muscle mass, you might come up as obese in the BMI, because if you know, for example, a rugby league player will step on the scales, they'll be 120 kilos, and that doesn't mean that they have a high fat level. So BMI we need to take with a little bit of grain of salt, but it's a good measure for the general healthy population. So why is it important to get in shape or to look after ourselves from a health perspective? Yes, we've got cancer as our primary, but we're also trying to avoid or limit any other chronic diseases such as blood pressure, diabetes, and other factors. I mentioned before as well that underweight can also be a factor, so depending on what stage of your treatment you're going through, we've had people in the past who have been put on cancer supplements, for example, because they have lost a lot of weight and have not come off them. So they've gained weight quite quickly. And then they've had that issue of trying to lose the weight through exercise and healthy diet. We also have other people who do gain a fair bit of weight naturally from different types of therapies, and those who lose a lot of weight. And we need to put on good quality muscle through things like protein and other macronutrients, which we'll go through. So as I said, today will be quite general. Some might apply to you, some might not, but if you have very, very specific questions about yourself personally, feel free to talk to me afterwards, but also interrupt in between if you have any general questions. So there are two types of factors with weight gain. There are the modifiable factors and there are the unmodifiable factors. The things that we can't change are our age. We can't really change that. We can't change our gender. So unfortunately for women who tend to gain a little bit of weight around here as they age, for gentlemen it's more around the midsection as well. We can't change those things. Genetic factors and also some medications. So some medications may have an effect on our weight. Things that we can change are our poor food choices, large and small portions, so depending on the sizing of our meals, lack of exercise, and also sedentary lifestyle. So I'm not sure, Jennifer, the exercise physiologist, might have mentioned this earlier this year, but exercise is one factor, so getting out there and walking for 30 minutes per day, but also a sedentary lifestyle is a little bit different. So if you find that you're not getting out and about, going to the shops or taking the dog for a walk or wandering over to the neighbour's backyard to have a chat, that's where we're looking at sedentary lifestyle. If you're not doing those things and just remaining seated, that's another factor we can change as well. So if you know you can't go out for an hour-long run, for example, and that's quite impractical, as long as we can stay quite active in the day. So the first thing we look at is balance and variety. So there is not one nutrient that can give us all the different benefits we need. We do need a wide variety of different colours and types of fruits and vegetables, grains and cereals, certain lean meat products, dairy products, a nice big range. The other important thing is to also eat regularly. If we don't eat regularly, our body cannot continue to basically repair itself. So as we go through the day, little micro tears occur in our body, so you're moving, your muscles are working, you're expending energy. In our bodies, we need 60 to 70% of the calories that we eat just to breathe, just for our heart to beat, just for our body to function. So we do need to make sure we're taking in a regular amount so we can keep the body going. There are three different, what we call macronutrients. So there are macro, which are big ones, and micro, which means smaller nutrients. The micro ones are things like iron, calcium, all those types of nutrients. The macro ones are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So the first one is your carbs, and you would have heard about carbs. There's a lot of conjecture in the media, don't have any carbs, have this many carbs, low fat, high protein. I'm here to tell you everything in moderation. You've heard it so many times before, but it's always about going back to the basics. There's no miracle diet that will cure anything. Basically, it's about getting that nice variety in. So with your carbs, we can look at a better quality carb. So there are carbs called low GI, and there are carbs called high GI. Low GI just means that it breaks down nice and slowly in our bodies. We feel a little bit fuller for longer, and it keeps our sugar levels under control. And it also has been shown to help with weight management as well. So they would be foods like multigrain bread as opposed to white bread, long grain rice, basmati rice as opposed to jasmine, certain pastas rather than, say, potato gnocchis and those more processed pastas, grains such as quinoa, couscous, buckwheats, those type of options, as well as potatoes. So sweet potato is actually very low GI, even though it's called sweet potato, so be mindful that's quite a good one. And there's also some low GI potatoes as well called charisma and nicola as well, as opposed to the normal white potatoes. So within each macronutrient group, there's still a better choice as opposed to the other choice. So carbs aren't all bad. We still need carbs. The only fuel our brain uses is carbs. So that's why when people go on a no-carb diet, they become a bit flat and they're very, very tired and fatigued through the afternoon and can't make it through the day. So it is important to include. And remembering also that fruits are also carbs. There's different types of sugars in a lot of different foods. The next component is fats. So there's different types of fats as well. So we have saturated fats, unsaturated fats. The saturated ones are normally from the animal products and they normally appear in hard form. They're the ones that tend to increase cholesterol. Our body still needs some type of good fat basically to help with the nerves, cells that basically help, they insulate the nerve cells basically from the brain to different parts of the body, as well as performing other beneficial things. For example, omega-3s, we've heard that there is a nice link there with arthritis and a few other issues too. So with unsaturated fats, they're basically from sources such as avocado, nuts, fish, and products like that. Trans fats is another one that you don't hear much of anymore, but that is quite a dangerous one. It's one that starts as an unsaturated fat and then undergoes the process of what's called hydrogenation, and then it becomes a bad fat. And they're found in things like, meat pies, the pastry in the meat pies. So that's the type of product that trans fats are often found in. Okay, people get a little bit bogged down in the word cholesterol as well. A lot of products will say cholesterol free or no cholesterol. That's very true because a lot of products don't naturally contain cholesterol. So that is quite true what they're saying, but it's not that they've cut it back. So people get very bogged down with eggs and the yolk in eggs and avoiding that and certain other products. There are other sources of saturated fats. The main sources of saturated fats which then become cholesterol, because once we eat saturated fat, it goes to the liver and becomes cholesterol. Animal fats, so if we're eating very fatty sources or larger portions. Takeaway foods, deep fried foods, full cream dairy, and other options like that. But people always focus on the eggs. Let's cut back all our eggs, and then they keep eating chocolate and takeaway. So we need to be very mindful of that. But yes, the yolks of the egg do contain a very small portion of cholesterol, so we'd still say about 4 to 5 eggs a week would still be okay. And if you need more, a few whites in with your whole egg. So tips to reduce fat. There's many different ways that we can really cut back on the fat. Things like our method of cooking, so using grilling options as opposed to other ones, replacing fatty snacks with healthier alternatives. And I'll show you later on as well how different 2 meals can look for the same calorie content. It's very, very interesting. Limiting high-fat foods, takeaways and snacks to once a week, switching to low-fat dairy products, choosing lean meat, and cutting visible fats off the meats, having 2 to 3 serves of fish per week, using margarines instead of butters and dairy blends, and using canola, sunflower, soybeans, all those oils. Margarine and butter is a little bit contentious. People do discuss that a little bit more processing goes into margarine. If you are already not using any spreads, if you just have a sandwich without any spread at all, don't start using margarine thinking that it will lower cholesterol. If you are using, however, a bit of butter, then you can do the swap if you'd like to, but always looking at reducing the portion. Avocado is better yet again, if you enjoy avocado as a bit of a spread option. It is very expensive, that's true. So meat and cancer risk, I do need to make a bit of a note on this. Red meat, particularly processed meat, is a risk factor for bowel cancer, so that link has definitely been shown. Burnt or charred meat may relate to an increased risk, and other factors may just include large portions of meat, high iron intake, and nitrates and nitrites, the preservatives that are found in some processed meats. Diets high in salt also may have a link to increased stomach cancer as well. Diets high in salt may also lead to a higher possible risk to stomach cancer. So there's no direct link with prostate cancer. There's no one food that we can say, yes, this definitely does it. But after diagnosis, or even if we're looking at prevention, we do look at just a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, looking at antioxidants like lycopene, so tomato-based, that red colouring in certain vegetables, using a lot of beans, lentils, whole grains, and those options, and steering very well clear of processed meats. They're sort of the main areas. Portion control. So this is a big one. So if we're looking at weight loss, we normally look at a plate. I might draw this. Oh. We have a blank one. So normally if we're looking at weight loss, we're looking at half a plate of vegetables and salads, quarter plate of the meat, fish, chicken, whatever your protein component would be, and your quarter plate of your carbs. And they're those low GI carbs that we were talking about. So that's a really good, easy way that we give people who are trying to lose weight, because that way at least they can stick with the recipes they enjoy, provided they're within the range that we've talked about, unsaturated fats, low GI carbs, good proteins, but at least that portion gives you an idea. Again, I won't give you exact quantities because that depends on your weight and how many calories you need to lose the weight, etc. But that's a good general rule. And then it changes. So if we're looking at weight maintenance, it would be more equal. So a third, a third, a third. And if we're looking at weight gain, higher in the carb side of things and the proteins. So basically we're looking at the total number of calories when we're looking at weight gain or weight loss and in between, and we're looking at the quality of the food content depending on the insides and keeping that healthy. Healthy snack options. So I'm not sure how across calories and kilojoules and things we all are here, but 1 calorie, which is the American unit that they use, is equal to 4.18 kilojoules. So that's where we get a little bit confused, because in Australia we should really be using kilojoules, but a lot of people speak in calories. So that's quite a good one to remember when you are looking at labelling, because some products will have kilojoules and then in brackets calories, some will just have one or the other. And people think, geez, 5,000 kilojoules, and then they'll divide and then work out that it's actually a little bit less in calories. So keep that in mind. Healthy snack. Well, almost. No, but and this is the thing. If you've got no real issues with weight gain, weight loss, etc., it's just a matter of being able to work out what is equal to what. So I'll show you this book actually. I've brought this along and you can have a look at it later on. It's called This Equals That, a life-sized photo guide to food serves. And if you can see there, that's a very small portion of coleslaw, 3 wedges, and a very tiny portion of lamb. So they're saying that actual portion on the page. As opposed to this whole plate of vegetables, a banana, half a cup of the apricots, and this nice piece of fish, that size. That equals that in terms of calories. And you do wonder, you think, wow, what is happening here? What kind of cooking and fats and oils have gone into this meal? Whereas if you prepare this, imagine how full you would feel from the fibre content, just from eating a little bit more slowly, having the good proteins in there. So I think that's quite an eye-opening example there to see the difference. And I'll pass it around later so you can have a look at that. Okay. And that's quite similar with snacks. People think, well, you know, how different is it really going to be if I swap from a full cream yogurt to, say, a lower fat dairy product that is still lower in sugars as well? And it is quite a difference. For example, if you were to buy a muffin, just a normal blueberry muffin, a normal size, and you were to eat, say, an apple as well as a yogurt tub, that would be equivalent in terms of calories. So which one will fill you up more? Often you eat a muffin and you're still quite hungry an hour later, whereas you eat your apple and your yogurt, there's a little bit of the carbs, a little bit of the protein, plus the fibre in the skin of the apple. You'll feel much more satisfied. And those small swaps have been enough for some people to just lose weight and naturally find that weight loss. Healthy snack options, there are a range. So if you'd like further options, come and see me if there's different bars you want to ask about or different things. Healthy fruit, pieces of fruit, always the way to go. Yogurts, you can do full fat yogurts if you'd like. If you've got no cholesterol issues, no problems with weight management, you can definitely just stick with a normal yogurt. Otherwise, there are a few good low fat and low sugar ones. Be mindful, some yogurts, when they say low fat, they'll pump back the sugar for the taste. If they're low sugar, they'll pump back the fat. So this is why we're doing a little bit of label reading later on. Different types of veggie sticks, so cut up cucumber, carrots, things like that, with a 1/4 cup of low-fat dip, or just on its own if you'd like. In terms of bars, muesli bars and things like that, they are very, very high in sugar. The best of the lot, if you had to go for some, would be Be Natural, which is a nice little trail bar, and Uncle Toby's Body Wise. So there are a few brands there that are a little bit better than others. Not an extensive list at all, but a couple of options. Mother Earth, not too bad in the grand scheme of things, in the middle, yeah. Cruscets and Vita-Wheats with something on it. So often a lot of people will make the mistake of, they'll have a couple of Cruscets or cracker breads and they'll put a spread on it. They'll eat that and they'll think, oh, I'm still hungry, I'll grab one more. So I always say to put some chunky fillings on top. So instead of doing the spreads, put something like tuna or a hard-boiled egg, or tomato, cucumber and some cheese, cottage cheese on there. And you will feel more satisfied in the long term. Plus you're getting that mixture. Remember we talked about a bit of fibre, fats, good fats, proteins and a little bit of carb as well. Yes?
Can I ask if you are still counting your spoons full of yogurt that you eat out of a large tub?
The spoons.
That's something I remember from the last time.
That's it, yeah.
And every time I count my spoons full, I think of you.
Oh, it's good that I've made an impression. That's the good thing. So this is the thing, I mean, if you've got that little yogurt tub at home, that's roughly 175 to 200 grams. So I would normally say if you're buying a litre, that should probably last 5 days, so a Monday to Friday type of a week. If it's going a little bit more quickly than that, I'm not sure. Unless obviously you're having it as 2 snacks in the day, if you're having it for morning and afternoon tea, as long as you know that that roughly 150 to 200 grams would be a serve. Yeah. Takeaway options. So just a quick note on this, because I understand that it is impractical to say we'll never have takeaway again and never eat out, because you're all social people and I'm sure you go out for dinner and enjoy things time to time. So just be mindful that even the smallest swaps will make a difference. So for example, if you go to a sandwich bar, so you've gone shopping to Woolworths or Coles and you haven't made it home and it's 1 o'clock and you need to grab lunch. If you've gone to a sandwich bar, just by choosing, say, grilled chicken with all the salads and eliminating sauces and cheese, you will have cut down by a significant amount compared to a chicken schnitzel on a sandwich, or the marinated chickens that you can get with cheese and avocado. Avocado is a tricky one. Avocado is a very, very good food for you. If you eat too much though, you'll still put on weight. The same way that people will overeat on nuts, they'll go, oh, this is all good fats, this is very healthy, but you'll never stick to the right portion. Everyone always goes over with things like nuts. The same as if you ate 6 or 7 pieces of fruit a day. So anything in a large quantity will still put on the weight as well. Again, I know I'm focusing on weight gain because that's the normal issue, but if you are having troubles trying to put on weight, that's another issue again, and we can talk about that. Takeaway wise as well, it's always about making those healthy swaps. So if you know you're going to have pizza one night, for example, instead of going out for pizza, maybe making it at home. I have a very good friend of mine who has now developed her own little base, and she calls it a cauliflower pizza base. So she uses cauliflower, she'll use a little bit of cheese, a little bit of flour, and she mushes it together and she makes her own crust on the bottom and then makes it on there, and it tastes wonderful. So it's about finding those little different changes, or not having cheese on the pizza, just putting on the vegetables and a little bit of lean meat. So not going for the salamis and the hams, popping on a little bit of oven breast chicken, for example. Or some prawns. Hamburgers, making hamburgers at home. Or the alternative again would be, instead of say the very, very fast food chains, going more for like a milk bar kind of a hamburger, which at least they use a meat patty when they use it. So thinking about those small changes, and it does make a difference. Like I said, just those swaps between the snacks make a difference. So of course the takeaway would as well. Particular with Italian cuisines and also Asian type of cuisine. So with Italian, bruschetta would be better than garlic bread, for example. Clear broths or your braised kind of dishes in Asian cuisines would be better, say, than satay beefs and black bean sauces and those heavy things. Again, not encouraging takeaway, but it's a matter of when you do that on the odd occasion, that you do know how to choose those healthier choices. Recipe modification. So again, we, as dietitians, we do encourage people to bring in their recipes from home, and then the ones that especially that they're using on a regular basis, and we try to make some swaps. So for example, you might really enjoy spaghetti bolognese, but you're thinking, geez, I'm having a lot of red meat through the week. So it might be a matter of including lentils as half, and then the meat as half as well, and mushrooms too. So making a little bit more of a balanced bolognese. And plus, if we're portioning it this way, then you might be having half a plate of the spaghetti bolognese mixture and then half a plate of vegetables and salads, for example. So again, you've cut down on the amount of fats there. If you are making things like curries, possibly using evaporated milks rather than the coconut creams and the heavy dishes. Being careful with salts, maybe using herbs and spices instead. The full fat pastries, if you're making pastry dishes, swapping that to the phyllo or the low fat. And the types of cuts of meat that you might be preparing, even so much as looking to see whether it's quite marbled. So steering clear of the marbled ones and going more for the lean types of meats. I will start to wrap up just the general talking component, and then we'll move on to the label reading. So basically, if you are looking for further cancer-specific information, I've pretty much compared all the research that I've done on my own and compared it with Cancer Council New South Wales, all their position statements, all their nutritional guidelines, their section that's addressing myths, and the questions and answer section is perfect. It's all wonderful information. I have found something else on what's called the Practice Evidence-Based Nutrition website, the Canadian Association of Dietitians has put together eating guidelines for after a prostate cancer diagnosis. So that will be a little bit interesting there. Again, it's most of the things that we've discussed today, so achieving a healthy body weight, including the foods high in lycopene, so the antioxidants, anything that's got the red colour, eating beans, eating foods that provide selenium, vitamin E rich foods, avoiding processed meats, being aware that you do need calcium and vitamin D, but also being aware that we don't go too high on that end of the scale too. So I've brought those. I've also brought some resources on healthy snacks, some low GI resources as well, and healthy takeaway choices too. And I'll give credit, a really good website to go to, which most of these resources are from, is Baker IDI, which is a Heart and Diabetes Institute in Melbourne. And it's just got general good healthy eating resources. And if you're looking for other ones as well, the Queensland Government, it's called NEMO, N-E-M-O, Nutritional Educational Materials Online. And they have all different areas as well. So if you're looking for something that's quite good quality, they would be the two to go for. So I'll just give you a quick intro into label reading before we move over there and do some practical things. And again, you're more than welcome to ask questions before we head over and then afterwards as well. So with label reading, you would be aware that on the label it always has per 100 grams, and then it will also say per serve. Okay, so when we're looking at those two, when you're comparing across two products, you always want to compare per 100 grams, because in very, very small writing up here, they'll probably write serves 2, or serves 10, or serves 1, for example. So for one company, a serving size might be 400 grams. For another company, it could be 200. So if we compare per 100 grams, you always know that you're going to be getting that serve, as long as it's a similar product. So it'd have to be 2 soups or 2 sauces, etc. So when we're looking at the per 100 grams on this side, there'll be energy, they'll have carbs or carbohydrates and sugars. They'll have total fat, saturated fat, and some packets might also break down the unsaturated fats too. They'll have protein, sodium, and fibre as well. Generally, the higher the fibre, the better. We're happy with fibre. Fibre's great. Energy. People get confused. What is energy? How do we come to that number? I'll go through it once now, but if you're still a bit stumped, then I can go through it a little bit again later on. But that's the one that will say kilojoules or calories. The way they come up with this number, for example, if there's, say, 10 grams of carbs, 10 grams of total fats, and 10 grams of protein, so say that's those. With carbs, 1 gram of carb is equal to 16 kilojoules. Protein, 1 gram of protein is equal to 17 kilojoules. And with fat, 1 gram of fat is equal to 37 kilojoules. So if you can imagine, with carbs, there's 10, so they will multiply that by the 16. With the fat, they'll multiply that by the 37, and with the protein, they'll multiply that by the 17. They'll add all of those together, and that gives you that number. So people always think, what's energy? How do they come up with this? And it's because they're looking at those 3 big macronutrients, and they've added them together to come up with the number of total calories going into your body. So that's a little bit interesting there. Carbs and sugars. If it says 10 grams of carbs and then it says 8 grams sugars, that means that 8 of that 10 is pure sugar. So it's not additive. You're not going, oh, there's 18 of something happening. So you can imagine then if a product says 40 grams of carb but 6 grams of sugars, there's less of that processed sugar than if it said, say, 37 of the 40 grams. Something like a fruit juice will always be the same. So it will say 40 grams of carbs, 40 grams of sugars, because it is even though it's a natural sugar, or if it is added, it is going to break down more quickly in our bodies. Total fat, saturated fat, same thing. So if it says 2 grams of saturated fat, 2 of the 10 is saturated, or that animal fat that we talked about that lifts cholesterol, so the saturated one. Protein, sodium. Sodium, it is very, very difficult to get anything with low sodium, just because they do use it for preservative purposes, for taste purposes, for everything at the moment. There are some general guidelines that we normally look at. It depends. Cancer Council has different guidelines and cutoffs to some other resources and things like that. So I'll give you a few general ones, but just know that they can vary depending on the organisation. So with sodium, we try to look at less than 120 milligrams per 100 grams. Very, very difficult, really difficult. And also be careful, because sometimes they'll write it in milligrams even if it's 1,200 milligrams, which is actually 1.2 grams. So be very careful, because they'll play around with it a little bit. Saturated fat, we're looking at less than 2 grams of saturated fat per 100 grams. And with sugars, we're really looking at as little as possible, but normally we would say less than around 10 grams per 100 grams. Some say less than 15 grams. At one stage, the Enrich program said less than 5 grams per 100 grams, but again, I'm not sure, as I haven't presented for Enrich for a year or so, so those might have been different. But in general, that's sort of a bit of an overview. Be mindful with anything that says light, L-I-T-E. Could mean light in colour, could mean light in serving size, could mean a little bit smaller. So be mindful with that light term. Light, yeah, yes, they're very tricky. What else? Cholesterol free, I mentioned too.
Light milk.
Light milk, so generally that does mean light. So in that particular case, with dairy, that's good that you mentioned that. So that is an exception. Low-fat dairy products generally will be lower in fat. So for example, full cream milk normally has 4 grams of the fats. Light milk will have 2 grams and skim will have 0. So that's the difference sort of between those products. Other claims, so there is the Heart Foundation tick. So Heart Foundation primarily looks at salt and fat content, but be mindful that not all companies get Heart Foundation to review their product. There's the low GI symbol that Australia's pioneering, so that's helpful for people looking at controlling their sugars. The low GI one, it's, I think I might have it here. It's a very small one, and I'll pass it around later, but it says GI certified, and it's like a G and an I with an arrow around it. It's blue, green and white. So I'll show you that, and the fact that you've asked that indicates that it is quite new. It's appearing on breakfast cereals primarily, and also breads. So you'll find it on a few of those products. And Australia is quite a leader in GI as well. And I'll show you a few other resources later on that may assist you with I suppose making the right choices. So for example, there is a magazine that's written by dietitians called the Australian Healthy Food Guide. Comes out once a month. Sometimes it's a minefield then in there looking at all your different magazines and trying to figure out which one's good, which one isn't. So that's one that's definitely quite good, because the dietitians are working in combination with other professionals to put that together for you, and each issue is on something different health-wise. So I think that wraps up the talking part. I hope you're not falling asleep. So that wraps that up. If you've got a few questions maybe that you'd like to ask now, and then we can move across there and spend as much time as you like really on label reading.
I've got a couple of questions from somebody that couldn't be here tonight. This is a man who has had a radical prostatectomy, but he is starting radiation.
Yes.
And particularly his wife was concerned about his diet. He's removed all dairy from his diet, except with a splash in his tea, replaced it with soy and almond milk. Is this of any value so far as you're aware of Cancer Council advisings?
And does, just a question there, does he have any other form of calcium? Is he having, so he's removed everything other than the soy and the almond, no cheese, no yogurts, no...
I guess not, because he's removed all dairy.
All dairy. And no supplementation that they've mentioned in there?
No.
Okay, so it is still a Cancer Council position, and also in general with dietitians, that we still need to have a certain amount of calcium within our diets basically to remain healthy. If you go over that, which would have to mean that you're eating quite a bit of dairy and then on a calcium supplement on top of that in a large dose, then it could have detrimental effects. Soy and almond milk still have calcium levels, but if he's particularly only using that in his tea, he probably does need to increase, whether that be through a dairy product, or if he is too afraid, he probably should see the GP or a dietitian of his own to see whether he qualifies possibly for some level of supplementation.
Right. And the other thing I think you've alluded to already, can red meat be eaten in small quantity, not often, without a problem?
Yes. So we did talk about depending on the quality of the meat. So some people are quite afraid and they'll steer clear of red meat altogether. A normal portion or a normal serve size is anywhere between about 75 to 100 grams cooked. So, I mean, if you're only doing that, say, twice a week and you're intermingling that with, say, 3 serves of the fish and a little bit of chicken now and again, that would be absolutely fine. But definitely steering clear of the very marbled meats, the meats that have left the fat around the edges, and the processed hams, salamis, things like that. Yeah.
Fine, thank you. Okay, some other questions.
I have a question, actually. Ken alluded to this before. We haven't mentioned it. Alcohol.
Alcohol.
Yes.
Okay, so what would you like to know about alcohol?
Beer, wine, red wine, white wine, spirits.
And one thing we did do to poor Katerina when she was here, we told her about Naughty Friday. So Friday night, sort of anything goes within reason. Isn't that right?
Well, look, you know, and the fact that I remembered you both and remembered Naughty Fridays is quite good. No, with alcohol, there's always going to be some sort of empty calories, what we call empty calories attached to it. So it would be the same as drinking, say, a lemonade or a glass of Coke, for example. You're still going to have those extra calories in there. Yes, red wines do contain antioxidants. However, if you're not drinking any alcohol at all, you don't have to sit there and go, geez, I might start having a red wine or start drinking and things like that. You will still be getting the antioxidants you need from your balanced diet. But yes, having a glass of wine. The general recommendations are within the week to have a few alcohol-free days a week, and on those other days that you might be drinking, having 1 to 2 standard drinks and no more than that. That would be the recommendation. Okay.
Where do you get free alcohol?
So, that's a good one. See, I should have, yeah. Yes?
This is more general. I'm sorry. Thanks, Graham. Some time ago I started to have a look at what I was eating.
Yes.
Now, I discovered a website. And what I do is I list down everything that I eat on that website and drink on that website. Now, it just so happens I put in Weet-Bix, and it'll come up and it'll tell me how much fat, how many carbohydrates, how much sugar, how much, etc., etc. And I found it's an excellent way of monitoring your daily intake of food and drink.
Perfect.
The only trouble is I can't remember what the site's called.
That's okay, you know, and that's the case. I mean, there's some people, it depends. In my private practice, when I do see people one-on-one, I see what works for them. So there are some people that say to me, look, I will get very, very stressed if you tell me to count things and to be constantly vigilant. So we do it through visual ways, visual aids, doing things like that. But if you're the sort of person that is quite interested and likes to see it broken down there are some great websites or what we call apps as well. So I'm not sure if you have iPhones or Androids, things like that. So MyFitnessPal is quite a good one. That is excellent. Just be mindful that when you do pop it in, sometimes when you pop in your height, your weight, your age, your exercise status, it'll put out a certain number of calories. Sometimes that hasn't been perfect for people, so often I'll ask people to go to a dietitian and just make sure that that calorie count is appropriate for you depending on what stage you're going through. So MyFitnessPal is quite good. There's a good app called Food Switch as well. It's by Bupa and the George Institute, and they've put it together, and what it is you can actually scan a barcode and it will tell you whether it's a red light, orange light or a green light in terms of sugars, fats and sodium. So that's quite a good one to make label reading easy. If you don't want to sit there and read, then you can scan that. So there are quite a few good, if you are quite handy with technology, there are some great things that, we can do there.
I just wanted to ask you about carbohydrates. Because I don't really understand them.
Yeah.
I see sugar goes into the total carbohydrate.
Yep.
And what's the other stuff? I know it's floury stuff.
There's still different types of sugars. So normally when they list the sugars, they're referring to what we call simple sugars. So the sugars that break down very, very quickly in our bodies. There are other sugars that take a while to break down in the body, and that's the difference. So when we talked about low GI and high GI, foods with high GI tend to have a higher mix of those very quick releasing sugars, whereas lower GI carbs have a lower mix of those quick release ones. So they're all still sugars. So carbohydrates is a group name for sugars, but when they list sugars on the packet there, they're referring more to that quick release. So things like your fructoses and those options. Yeah.
Things like flour would be included in carbohydrates?
Flour would technically be used to make things such as your pastas and baked goods and things like that. So yes, it would be included as part of those combination mixes. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
G'day. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of variation of opinion about diet amongst the experts. I'm not talking about amongst us. And particularly in recent years, a lot of stuff's coming out that we've probably read about, and they can't all be correct. They seem to conflict one another. For example, the video Forks Over Knives, have you seen this video?
The which one, sorry?
Forks Over Knives. These guys are experts in the field, and they're recommending basically plant-based diets, whole food plant-based diets. But this is fly in the face of conventional history, and plus over the many years, this story is a ever-changing story. Like, as more information comes out there, then the story keeps changing. So have we got to the end of the line?
Yeah, exactly right. So that's a very loaded question. So I'll do my best to answer it in the short amount of time we've got. But definitely, I mean, there's different stages. A lot of people will look at one stage in evolution or in a human's lifespan, for example, and they'll use that as the diet. So for example, you might have heard of the paleo diet. Paleo diet is basically meats, things like that, no dairy products, and being very, very mindful with things like fruits and things. So paleo is very, very meat-based, and they also really dislike grains. So, well, this is the thing. So dietitians are all pretty much on the same page. So this is where I'll do the plug on accredited practicing dietitians. Someone who's giving you any kind of dietary advice should be an accredited practicing dietitian, so an APD. If you're looking for one of those, go to Dietitians Association of Australia, and we have to be registered there. Okay? All dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are dietitians. So a lot of people can call themselves nutritionists depending on what kind of qualification they've received. But you're sort of looking more for a dietitian, because dietitians deal in chronic diseases, not just weight management, and that's it. So going back to your question, dietitians are all of the same mind. What you will have heard is a lot of other professionals, so it could be GPs, could be chefs. In recent times, there's been a lot of chefs butting heads with different dietitians and other professionals that aren't really dietitians in their field, the same way that I wouldn't stand here and give you an entire lesson on exercise physiology or giving you the entire history of prostate cancer and statistics and things, because I'm not a GP. I suppose that's where I'm sort of coming from in that sense. Plant-based diets are great. I mean, yes, we do need to make sure that we are having, we have in Western society moved away a lot from the plant-based, so having enough vegetables, fruits, nuts, grains and things like that. We do still need a little bit of protein to ensure that our muscles do continue to recover after exercise and activities. So really it's everything in moderation, although Western society has gone a bit crazy with meats. That's been the issue. With paleo, for example, they're arguing that people started to gain weight a lot when the grains were introduced. I argue that everything was still okay until the 80s and 90s, where all the processed foods came in. So I think it's just a matter of trying to make things as fresh and unprocessed as possible. And when we say unprocessed, I mean, yes, you can still have a frozen bag of vegetables because it is easier, because it has been snap frozen. But I mean, if we're looking at things like, you know, ready-made soups and ready-made other products, then we need to be a little bit mindful of what goes in them.
I was brought up during the war, and everything was rationed.
Yes.
And I got into a bad habit. Just a few quick one-liners. Avocados, I have them a lot, but the trouble is I cut them in half.
Yep.
But it doesn't take long. I have to put them in the fridge so they don't go off.
Yeah, that's it. So, some people might put a bit of lime or lemon on there, and that might hold them a little bit longer. But yes, I think it's very, very difficult unless you're you have a family situation where you can cut it in quarters. And when you're by yourself, I would just recommend buy the very, very small ones. You know, if you can.
Leave the stone in it?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Can I actually suggest something?
Of
No, I
course.
don't need it. I've got strong enough voice.
I told them the same thing, but they still marked me up.
Okay, sorry. What I do with avocado, actually, I mix it up with cottage cheese,
Yeah, excellent.
and then that way you can keep it in the fridge for at least 4 days.
Do you like cottage cheese? but that's a good
A
option.
little bit of chili with it.
And I think this goes back to your question as well. And I like that everyone has an opinion on food. You know, everyone has an opinion on food, and it's great as well because different people can share different recipe ideas and things like that. The issue becomes that, for example, I wouldn't come to your place and say, hey, I'm not a plumber, but I'll fix your toilet. Whereas there are a lot of people coming in and saying, hey, I'll write you a meal plan, but they're not qualified. So always think of that, I suppose, when you're looking, for a professional or for the research as well. Especially if you're looking at research papers, be very, very mindful of what you read online. Oh, I've read this and this supplement's apparently working. Go to a website like Cancer Council who has position statements and clinical guidelines which have been proofread by.
Can I just finish?
Yes.
They're only one-liners.
Yes.
Yogurt, I make my own yogurt, but should you use the full cream one or the other one? Because I'm very naughty.
Well, I suppose there's a checklist. So if you've got really no weight issues, which appears to be fine, if you've got no real cholesterol or heart concerns at the moment, or that's the least of your problems, then
Keep going.
That's fine.
Fibre diet.
Yes.
A wheat bix all right to have?
Fibre, yeah, Wheat Bix is okay. So I mean, again, if we're being very picky on something like, say for example, if you have diabetes, then there might be a few lower GI cereals than Wheat Bix that we can recommend. But in the grand scheme of things, yeah, Wheat Bix is okay. And it's a matter of what you put with that as well.
If you don't have any salt at all, is that naughty? Or
If you don't have any salt at all. So that's interesting because a lot of products already have some salt in them, so you're probably getting enough in anyway. But if you're really good and you're not having any processed foods and you're not adding salts in anything, that's not a great shame unless you go for blood tests with the GP and they state that your sodium's a little bit low. For some people, they'll experience a little bit of cramping if their salt's a little bit low because water, normally the salt holds the water in and keeps you hydrated, etc. So sometimes if you're very low on the salt, you might have some symptoms like that. But no, there's nothing against you cutting back on salt because you don't enjoy it. Yeah.
I've got one more question. What do you think about the type of diets where you can eat one day only protein, the other way carbohydrate, the other way whatever? You know, these split type of diets. Is that recommended?
Short answer, no. No, I really, anything that restricts you, I believe is not necessarily a good diet. For example, I make it a point not to say no to a lot of patients. I will say, yes, but how about this? How about we do these options and things? A really good basis is to do that plate, just because the veggies and all the veggies will have the antioxidants, all your micronutrients, they'll have the fibre so you'll feel fuller. The protein also makes you feel fuller and helps basically with muscle recovery and other factors. And the carb side of things, if we cut out carbs, like I said, the brain hasn't really got any of that energy to go off, or just immediate energy for your body to use, and the good fats as well. So the more balanced we stay each day, the better. Yeah. And also, sorry, depends on a condition as well. So for example, if you were a diabetic and you cut out everything and you just had 2 days of full protein and that's it, your sugars will go too low. So we need to be quite mindful of all the other conditions.